Okay, so we are going to work today with the essence of the object and exploring minimalism and distillation and abstraction. So some essential terms to understand when you're talking about art. If you're talking about something that's realistic, you have something that looks like the real thing. Like in this is a colored pencil drawing of a bird that looks real. It looks like a real bird. You could look at that and identify its species and what gender it is and probably its age. And then if you're talking about something that's representational, it represents a real thing. You can look at something, you can say, oh, that's a bird, but it might be stylized and cartoony. It may not be very specific. And this is an example of that. Just a little cute line drawing of a bird for a coloring book or something. It's obviously a bird. If you have something that's abstract, the image represents the visual essence of the thing. For birds, when you're a kid and you're doing a landscape and you have birds in the background and you do the little flying V's to show birds flying, or in this case, the singular line drawing of a hummingbird. And then if you have something that's not objective, it does not visually relate to the object. It focuses on the art principles and elements, but it might have a related theme. And over here you have a very famous abstract, non-objective sculpture called Bird in Flight by Brancusi. And if you just were to encountering it without a title, you probably may not relate it to a bird, but with the title you can see a couple different things happening. It sort of looks like it could be a stylized feather. It could be capturing the motion of a bird as it takes off, and it also can be a stylized part of a propeller for a plane. So moving towards abstraction, how do you make things abstract? When people look at abstract art, a lot of times because it tends to be simple, they think, or it just looks like a bunch of lines or something, they think it's pretty easy. Actually, it's pretty hard. So we're going to look at a particular artist, Piet Mondrian. He worked in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and he used a lot of different things to become one of the first totally abstract artists. He did not begin that way. And the theory that we're working with is abstraction is based on getting the visual essence of an object, the most important things. The object here that we're going to study is a tree and his paintings of tree. So here is a photograph of a tree. It's a white oak, I think. And then here is one of his early paintings of a lane and some corn sheaves and a tree. And the tree, even though it's impressionistic, it's pretty realistic. You can see it has, a trunk and some branches or limbs and leaves on it. He really enjoyed the way the tree branches curved. That was what he started focusing on. And he started working with trees that emphasized the movement and the structure of the tree branches. So at the top here, this is a live oak. Actually, it's angel oak in Johns Island down by Charleston. It's one of the oldest living things. But in this, you can see how the branches kind of move and curve and dominate with the trunk. And I chose that because it's very visually similar to his drawing of an oak tree and emphasizing the branches and things. It's still a pretty realistic drawing. He has some objects and landscapes for context. He's kind of blocked out some of the leaves, but they're not important. It's all about the trunk and the branches. And then he kind of lost color and used more expressionist colors. And pretty much the background is getting really lost. It's all, again, about the trunk and the movement of the branches. As you move to the black and white tree, It's more about the branches. The trunk is starting to recede. He's starting to pay more attention to the negative space in between the branches. Moving on to these two abstractions, you can see how this still has a pretty defined trunk. The background has totally just been abstracted into lines and curves, and the branches are more flowing, they're less structured, more rhythmic. Over here, the trunk becomes curved like the branches. It doesn't even have those bark lines on it anymore. And the branches are just these rhythmic kind of curves that come up and originate by the trunk. Looking at these, they're abstract. You can still tell that it's a tree though. Now we're going to jump to non-objective. These are non-objective trees. If you look at that on the left, you can still get the idea of a trunk coming up and those same movements of the branches. And then you also have these kind of leaf shapes that are created by the branches. That kind of bugged him. He wanted to get away from that. So in this, you have a series of straight lines representing trunks, and then more of just the very, very non-representational curves and lines that are the branches and the canopy or the leaves of the trees. So when we talk about abstraction, Mondarian began with a tree. He focused on a specific part, the movements and the lines and the branches. He kept distilling it. Distilling means you take away, you simplify. He took away color. He took away the background. He took away the leaves. He took away the trunk until there was just the movement that was left by the lines. And that became his essence of a tree. That's pretty non-objective, pretty abstract, the bottom one. But how close it is to a tree? Well, when you check the essence, and we're stepping over into math for a minute, everything is made up of fractals. And this is something that was kind of really defined after Mondarian. Fractal math is self-repeating geometry. It's found in both natural and manufactured objects. Everything from the way your cells are in your body to the whole outline of islands are fractals. And they are determined by equations. Now, of course, the equation for your fractal is influenced by the environment because we're not in a vacuum, so that's why things lean to one side or they're not perfect. But a fractal tree, whoops, looks like this, okay? And in his paintings, this is the farmhouse tree, and there's a farmhouse down here with trees in the background, and you can see how close that is to a fractal canopy. And then likewise in the red tree that you saw before, you can see how it's also close. Somebody actually did their doctorate on this, on the math behind Mondarian trees, and broke them into fractals, and here is part of the mathematical relationships. Anyway, your assignment is abstraction and distillation experiment. So your materials, you can draw with anything you want to. I used a black Sharpie marker. Your prompt, you're starting with a natural object. It can be a plant or a shell or bones. Keep it kind of simple. You can use a resource photo like I did. I pulled this shell photo off the web, or you could take your own photo. And you're going to create an abstract drawing of the object. So focus on capturing the essence of the object. It might be movement, color, shape, or whatever, like in the tree example. And you might have to draw it a few times to get it abstract. I drew mine on note cards, and I did 5 versions before I fully got it abstract, which I'll show you in the next slide. And then you upload your original and then your abstraction. For this shell, what I focused on were both the curves, how it goes around, and then these angles that come up. So here is the shell. Here is my first drawing of the shell. which is pretty decorative. It's pretty representational. You can look at that and you can still see it's a shell. It's a pretty fancy shell. And then I started reducing it. This is the next drawing. I simplified by taking out some of the connective lines and deciding things that were important. This back part was important. The main curve of the body, I made that much thicker. And then some of these little top knots. The next one down, I took away some of the detail. The bottom part is still important, as is the body curve. And then the top spiral, but I don't have these interior things. I don't need them there. What kind of started bugging me about this is that, and I like it too, but it was distracting from what we're doing, is the way the body spiral here became kind of almost like a claw kind of look, and that might be something to play with for another thing. And then down here is my final abstraction. I kind of unified the body curve with the curve of the tail or the end of the shell, and that's super exaggerated. So if you're looking at the shell itself, it's this part here, how it kind of goes up and then down and around, and then it hits this and it goes up and down. And then I unified this top part. It's a little clumsy. This is a little thicker than I like, but it works. And that's an abstraction. Photograph and upload.